Imagine waking up in a world where hot showers, toothpaste, and even toilet paper haven't been invented. Where your mattress is made of straw, your bathroom is a bucket, and your alarm clock is the sound of livestock relieving themselves nearby. Welcome to the 1300s, the time period where survival wasn't just a goal, it was a full-time job. If you're thinking you'd do just fine, maybe live in a cute cottage with a pet goat and a cozy fire while wearing a linen tunic and baking bread, think again. You wouldn't last a day, because real medieval life? It was a mashup of constant hunger, dirt-caked feet, mysterious illnesses, teeth that hurt all the time, and a social structure so rigid you could get publicly whipped for sneezing during Mass. And today, just for you, we're going to live it, minute by miserable minute. So, let's wake up. It's 1347. You don't know that, of course. The calendar isn't really your concern because you can't read, and the year only matters to monks and nobles. For you, there's only now, and a little while later, and after I survive the winter. You open your eyes to the stink of your father's breath. He's still asleep beside you, mouth open, snoring like he's choking on a turnip. Across the bed is your mother, your baby sister, and maybe your cousin or a chicken. It depends on the night. The bed is more like a burlap sack stuffed with straw, slightly damp, slightly warm, and alive with the occasional flea. Privacy is not a word you've ever heard, and even if you had, there's nowhere it could exist. Your house is one room, just one. You sleep, eat, argue, and pray all in the same dim, smoky box made of mud and sticks. You slip out from under the wool blanket, more scratch than comfort, and stretch your limbs, which are sore even though you're barely in your teens. The floor is hard-packed dirt. The air smells like smoke, sweat, and something vaguely fungal. You pee in the family bucket. That's your first task of the day. It's kept near the door, and it's heavy with yesterday's offerings. You'll have to dump it later into the trench behind the house, hopefully shouting Gardaloo, in time so nobody's passing by when it splashes. Your mother is already stirring the morning pottage. Again, always pottage. A thick porridge made of grains and water, sometimes flavored with leeks or a few dried beans if you're lucky. If you want salt, you'll need to trade something. Salt is expensive. Salt is power. You eat your portion in silence, blowing on the steaming mess and swallowing fast. It's hot, it's plain, but it's food. Your younger brother eyes your bowl, even after licking his own clean. You tilt it up and scrape the last bit with a finger, licking it off before handing the bowl back. Time to work. The sun hasn't risen yet. You follow the light of the hearth as you step out into the chill, into the mist that always hangs low over the fields this time of year. Your feet squelch through wet ground. If you're lucky, you've got a pair of hand-stitched leather shoes with holes in them. If you're not, it's just skin to soil. The village is barely a dozen houses scattered like crumbs on a rough wooden table. Each one has smoke rising from the center. You see your neighbor hobbling out of his hut, back already bent from years of toil. He nods to you. You nod back. You don't know what day it is, not in any meaningful way, but the bell from the church tells you it's time for Mass. Again, always Mass. The church is the biggest building in the village. It's stone, cold, and damp inside. You kneel on hard earth with the others, watching the priest mumble in Latin. You don't understand a word of it, but you nod when you're supposed to. This is less about faith and more about being seen. Not showing up means someone might whisper that you're in league with the devil. And in a world with no real medicine or explanations for disease that can get you killed, you take the thin, dry wafer from the priest's hand and let it sit on your tongue. It tastes like paper. Your stomach rumbles anyway. After church, you're expected in the fields. Always the fields. The land belongs to the local lord, a man you've never spoken to, never even looked in the eyes. He owns your house, your labor, your future. You pay him in crops, in work, and in obedience. Your task today? Clearing rocks from the planting beds. Again, your hands already hurt before you've picked up the first stone. The soil is unforgiving, wet and sticky and full of surprises, sharp roots, worms, bones. Sometimes animal, sometimes not. Midday comes with no fanfare. You stop for a moment to chew on some hard bread and sip a weak ale your sister brewed last week. Water isn't safe to drink. Everyone knows that. Even the babies drink ale, though it's more like grainy, sour water with bubbles. Still, it keeps the thirst away. The wind picks up. Your tunic flaps. You're shivering, but you keep working. Evening rolls around with a sky the color of iron and a stomach that still growls. Dinner is more pottage. Slightly different color. Same flavor. You sit around the hearth with your family, listening to your father cough and your mother whisper prayers for the spring harvest. The fire dims. The night creeps in. You lie back down on your shared mattress, curl up into a ball to keep the heat close, and stare at the thatch above your head, where spiders weave their quiet nets between the beams. You fall asleep scratching your arm, trying not to think about what's biting you. Another morning. Another dreamless sleep, broken by the smell of wet straw and boiled onions. You sit up, blinking at the light that filters in through the cracks in the wall. Your sister is already outside feeding the chickens, or chasing them, more likely. One of them is half-plucked and angry. It hisses at her. She hisses back. You stretch your arms, feel the sharp pop in your shoulder, and reach down to scratch your calf. A flea jumps off. You shrug. Normal. Your mother is stirring the same pottage pot. You wonder if she's ever stopped. Maybe the pot is bottomless. Maybe it's been cooking since before you were born. Today is bath day. Not because anyone feels particularly dirty, though you are, but because it's been long enough that people are starting to notice the smell. You and your siblings take turns pouring cold water from a cracked jug into a large wooden tub outside. One person sits. One person scrubs. One person laughs at the other two. You go last. The water is gray by the time it's your turn. You dip your foot in, try not to gag, and grit your teeth as your sister scrubs behind your ears with a bit of rag and ash soap. You get out colder than you went in. Back inside, your clothes are stiff and smoke-stained. They're the only ones you have. You pull them back on anyway. The church bell rings again. It always rings. Today is confession. Public confession. Everyone gathers in the little church, huddled together in rows. The priest stands at the front and gestures to one person at a time. Your neighbor's daughter admits to stealing an apple from the altar. She cries. The priest nods, gives her 3 Hail Marys and a day without supper. Another man admits to missing Mass 3 days in a row. He gets to sweep the chapel floor for a week. Your turn. You say you've had wicked thoughts. You don't explain further. The priest nods. He doesn't ask. He gives you penance and sends you back to your seat. Confession is less about honesty than it is about keeping the balance. Everyone sins. Everyone gets forgiven. Everyone gets reminded that God is always watching, and so is everyone else. Outside, it starts to drizzle. Again, always the drizzle. You're sent to gather firewood from the forest. It's not far, but it's dangerous. Wolves live out there, and worse, rumors of spirits, old curses, and strange lights in the trees. You don't believe in any of that, except when you're alone. You find a few damp branches and haul them back. Your shoulders ache. You haven't eaten since breakfast, and even that was more water than oats. Back home, your father is sharpening a blade. Your mother is pulling lice from your brother's hair. The fire crackles. Your stomach growls. Dinner comes and goes. Same stew. More pottage. A bite of radish from the garden. Someone tells a story, an old tale about a boy who tried to steal a relic from the church and got struck blind. Everyone listens. Everyone laughs. But no one questions it. The church is too real, too powerful. If the priest says a candle cures plague, then it does. If he says your cough is sin made visible, then it is. You lie down again. Same mattress. Same blanket. You scratch your scalp and feel something under your fingernail. You flick it away. The wind howls outside. You close your eyes and pray that tomorrow is no colder than today. Sleep comes slowly, but it comes. Time, in your world, doesn't come in numbers. There are no hours, no minutes, no clocks, not even sundials for someone like you. Time is measured in chores, church bells, and aching muscles. You know it's morning when your mother starts yelling. You know it's night when your father stops coughing long enough to fall asleep. You don't count your age. You don't celebrate birthdays. You exist in a loop of days, each one eerily like the last. The seasons change, and you notice them only because the work changes with them. Cold brings wood chopping and numb fingers. Heat means mosquitoes and flies that swarm your food and your face with equal enthusiasm. Today is cold. You wake up shivering. Your breath clouds in the air above your mouth. There's frost on the inside of the walls. Someone has peed in the corner again, too lazy or too frightened to go outside during the night. Your shirt is damp. You wear it anyway. The sky is an endless slate of gray, and the wind carries the scent of dead leaves and wet animals. You find a crust of bread near the hearth and chew it slowly, softening it with spit. It's dry, but your jaw is stronger than it should be at your age. Your hands have calluses. You don't remember when you got them. Outside, the men are already at it. Axes swing in rhythm. The younger boys chase chickens. A dog limps by with a chunk of something in its mouth. No one asks what it is. Your job today is to walk with your uncle to the mill, 3 miles each way, and the road is more mud than ground. You carry the grain sack on your back. It weighs almost as much as you do. It shifts as you walk, spilling a little out of the frayed edge. You say nothing. If your father finds out you lost some, you'll lose more than dinner. The mill is run by a man who smiles too much and counts the grain with a hand always too close to your face. You keep your eyes down, let your uncle do the talking. You wait while the wheel turns, slow and groaning. The water slaps it from the creek below, splashing cold droplets that hit your legs. You watch the flour fall into the bin, soft as snow you'll never play in. On the way back, your uncle talks about the war. There's always a war, somewhere. You don't know where France is, but you know it's full of people who want what your king has. And your king? You've never seen him. You've never even seen anyone who's seen him. But he owns your life, somehow. Maybe you'll go fight one day, your uncle says. Bring honor to the family. You say nothing. You hope you're dead before that day comes. Back home, the flour goes into the barrel. Your mother thanks you with a nod. That's all you'll get. You warm your hands near the fire and help stir tonight's stew. Your father has been coughing blood. He wipes it away before anyone can see, but you saw? Your mother saw. Your brother saw. No one speaks of it. The old woman who lives near the edge of the village offers to come pray over him. She smells like burnt rosemary and speaks to things that aren't there. Some people say she's a witch. Others say she's just crazy. You're not sure there's a difference. She mutters over your father while he lies still, pale and sweating. She places a dried toad's foot under his pillow, says it helps with spirits in the lungs. That night, you dream of frogs and fire and empty bowls. Let's talk about pain. Because in your world, pain is not something to be avoided. It's something that simply is. Always. It's the background hum of existence. From the moment your eyes open to the moment they shut, there's a little ache somewhere. A splinter in your toe, a pulled muscle in your back, a rotten tooth, a bruise that came from nothing and stayed. You've never known a single person who wasn't hurting in some way. And when that pain becomes too much to bear, you turn to the healers. Today, that means walking your sister to the midwife. She's feverish, pale. Her stomach is swollen. Not with a baby. At least, you hope not. She's too young, you think, but no one ever says too young out loud. The midwife's hut smells like lavender, which is suspicious. Nothing smells good in this village unless it's burning. She has a wall full of dried herbs, tied into bunches and labeled with ink you can't read. She waves her hands, mutters prayers to saints you've never heard of, and crushes something into a paste. She tells your sister to drink it, and she does. And then she says to sleep facing east for 7 nights, and keep a clove of garlic under her tongue. You nod. You don't know if any of this works. But what else is there? The only real doctors live in cities you've never seen, and even they aren't what you'd think. They believe your body is ruled by 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. And if you're sick, it's because one of those is out of whack. The solution? Bleeding. Sometimes with a knife. Sometimes with leeches. Sometimes by drilling a hole in your skull to let the evil air escape. No thanks. You'd rather take your chances with the midwife and her garlic. But even she can't help everyone. There's a boy in the village, barely 4, who fell from a ladder last week. He hit his head and hasn't spoken since. He stares at the ceiling now, eyes wide, lips moving without sound. His mother cries when she thinks no one's looking. The priest says it's God's will. The midwife says he may recover if the moon is kind. The old woman with the rosemary says the devil touched him. You just hope he doesn't die. Because when people die here, they die fast. Your neighbor, the one with the limp? Gone. Just didn't wake up one morning. They buried him that afternoon in a shroud of sackcloth, with only a few prayers and a sprinkle of dirt. No gravestone. Just a lump in the ground behind the chapel, marked with a small pile of rocks to keep the dogs away. You asked your father once what happens when we die. He said, we go back to the dirt. That's where we came from. You haven't asked again. That night, the wind is howling again. The stars are hidden. Your sister sleeps with garlic under her tongue. Your mother lies awake, whispering prayers for your father. You curl up in your spot, trying not to cough. You feel a blister forming on your heel. You don't remember a time when your body didn't hurt somewhere. And yet, you sleep. Because tomorrow is another day. Another chance to survive. Let's talk about food, or what passes for food in your world. Because eating in the 1300s isn't a pleasure. It's a ritual of necessity. A tightrope walk between hunger and monotony, with a few dangerous missteps into poison, rot, or famine. If you're a peasant, and you are, your diet is a slow, soggy carousel of porridge, root vegetables, and bread hard enough to be used as a weapon. The bread is black, dense, and sometimes stretched with things that should never be in bread. Powdered tree bark, old lentils, dried peas, even ground acorns. Anything to make it last longer. Anything to make it feel more filling. Taste. That's a luxury you don't expect. If something actually tastes good, you get suspicious. Today, your mother hands you your ration, a chunk of that same old rye loaf, smeared with dripping fat scraped from the stew pot. It's barely food, but it's yours. You take a bite. Your teeth protest. You chew slowly, letting your saliva soften the edges, and you wonder what meat tastes like. Real meat. Not rat. Not a scrap of bone boiled in water until it whispers of flavor. Not pigeon or the occasional lucky rabbit. Real meat, like pork or beef, stuff you've seen offered to the Lord during festival days. But pigs are expensive. Cows even more so. And they don't belong to you. If you kill one, even if it's technically yours, you owe a cut to the local lord. If you don't, that's theft. Theft is punishable, sometimes by flogging, sometimes by worse. So you eat what you have. Root vegetables pulled from the garden, onions, leeks, turnips, carrots if you're lucky. You stew them with grain in a thick, bubbling mess that could feed 10 or starve 5. It depends on how thin you make it. No spices, of course. You've heard of spices. Pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, they sound like fairy tales. The priest talks about them when he returns from the bishop's court in town, where the nobles sprinkle them like fairy dust on roasted birds. You've never tasted them. You've only dreamed of them. And yet, there are herbs. Your mother has a bundle of dried sage, some rosemary, and a sprig of thyme that she guards like treasure. She uses them sparingly, enough to keep the stew from tasting like hot sadness. Once a month, there's a feast. It's usually tied to a religious day, not because anyone feels like celebrating, but because the church says you should. So the villagers pool their food. A pig gets slaughtered. Ale is brewed stronger. Someone makes pies, flaky crusts filled with mashed vegetables, onions, maybe even a cube or two of salted pork if the gods are kind. You remember your last bite of meat. Real meat. It was 2 months ago, at the feast of St. Barnabas. A slice of pork, charred at the edges, dripping with grease. You chewed it so slowly that your brother slapped your arm. You slapped him back. Your mother slapped both of you. Totally worth it. Today, you eat alone near the fire. Your father's portion is smaller than usual. He's not eating much lately. Your mother says he's saving his strength. You know she's lying. Food has always meant more than just sustenance. It's power. It's social standing. It's proof that you're still clinging to the edge of survival. And when it runs out, when the harvest fails, when the stores run dry, people change. They steal. They barter. They lie. They bury small children in the woods to hide the fact that they didn't make it through the week. Famine is never far away. It walks behind the village like a hungry dog, sniffing the wind. Right now, the pantry is half full. The turnips are shriveling. The oats are dwindling. The bread mold has been scraped off twice already. And winter's not done yet. So tonight, you go to sleep with a stomach that still growls. Not from starvation. Not yet. Just from being underfed. From being used to hunger. It's a familiar sound. Let's talk about cleanliness. Or rather, the illusion of it. Because you're not technically dirty. You're just always covered in a very thin, persistent film of life. Life in the form of sweat, smoke, ash, dust, and whatever animal wandered too close this morning. Your fingernails are blackened. Your hair is matted, even after you run a carved comb through it every few days. Your clothes haven't seen soap in weeks. And your feet. Well, let's just say you've learned to ignore the smell. But you try. You really do. You wash when you can, usually with cold water from the stream and whatever you can find that lathers. Ashes, fat, sometimes a special bar of soap your aunt makes that smells like boiled wool and sadness. You scrub behind your ears. You rinse your feet when the weather allows. You wash your hands before church. Most of the time, bathing is a social activity when it happens. The women bathe together. The men bathe together. Privacy is a concept reserved for nobility and confession. Sometimes people bathe in the river, stripping off their tunics and laughing through the shock of icy water. You once tried to bathe during winter and nearly lost a toe. But hygiene isn't just about washing. It's also about not dying from being too clean. You've been told that too much bathing weakens the body. That warm water opens the pores and invites disease in like an unwanted guest. Some people go months without a proper bath for that reason. They wipe down instead. Arms, neck, hands. That's enough. Hopefully. Hair. Long, usually. Braided or tied back. The village barber cuts hair with a dull blade and mostly for lice removal, not style. He also pulls teeth, lances boils, and bleeds people when the priest says your humors are out of balance. Lice are constant companions. You scratch your scalp in your sleep. Your sister does the same. Everyone has them. You treat it by dousing your head in vinegar or boiling rosemary in water and pouring it over your hair. It doesn't kill the lice. It just makes them dizzy. Fleas are worse. They live in the straw beds, waiting for warm flesh to sink their teeth into. You've seen your mother beat the mattress with a stick before bedtime, hoping to shake some out. It doesn't work. Your house smells like wood smoke, stew, feet, and something vaguely sour. The air is thick, but familiar. You don't even notice it anymore. The church tells you that true purity is of the soul, not the skin. That dirt is natural. That Jesus never bathed with scented oils or mint soap. So you feel better about skipping your wash when the stream is frozen. Still, there are efforts. Your mother sweeps the floor with a bundle of twigs every morning. Your father keeps the woodpile neat. You clean the hearth regularly, scraping out old ash and replacing it with fresh coal, if you have any. Your shirt? You beat it against a rock once a week. It helps, slightly, until you put it back on and it starts collecting the day all over again. And yet, you've never felt gross. Because gross is a comparison. And here, in this life, this time, this village, you're just like everyone else. You smell like everyone else. You itch like everyone else. You clean like everyone else. So you go to bed after rinsing your hands in cold water, wiping your face with a damp cloth, and blowing your nose into the fire. Clean enough. And when you curl up under the blanket, surrounded by the gentle chorus of coughs and chickens, you feel fine. Not clean, not dirty, just alive. You wake up with a sore throat and a headache that feels like someone is hammering your skull from the inside. You know what this means. You're dying. Well, not literally, not yet. But in this time, in this place, something as simple as a sore throat has the potential to spiral into a funeral. Medicine in the Middle Ages is part folklore, part prayer, and part bloodletting. It's less about science and more about survival, and a whole lot of hope that the village wise woman, or, God help you, the traveling barber surgeon, knows which herbs are for healing and which will send you to meet your maker before sunset. You don't go to the doctor. There are no doctors. There's the midwife, the bone setter, the herbalist, and maybe the old man who once worked in a monastery and remembers something vague about St. Cuthbert curing people with time. So today, your mother brings you a thick broth laced with garlic and onions, healing foods. She also ties a small pouch of dried herbs around your neck to ward off evil vapors. She says, not quite meeting your eye. You're not sure what that means, but the herbs smell strong and slightly like mildew. So maybe the vapors will leave just out of politeness. If things get worse, fever, pus, rashes, hallucinations, they'll call the priest. The priest doesn't treat symptoms. He treats souls. He'll pray over you. He might burn incense. If he's feeling proactive, he'll tell you to confess your sins. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes people just get better. And sometimes they don't. There's a theory about humors, bodily fluids that govern your health. Blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too much of one, and you're imbalanced. The treatment? Bleeding. Leeches, knives, or cups, depending on your status and how long it's been since someone last opened your veins in the name of wellness. If you're lucky, someone will boil willow bark for you. It's the medieval version of aspirin. It doesn't taste great, but it dulls the pain slightly. If you're unlucky, someone might shove a clove of garlic up your nose or hold a hot iron near your feet to draw out the sickness. And then there's superstition. You've heard the whispers. about charms carved into wood, about burying eggs under doorways, about tying dead animals to the sickbed to draw away the illness. Once, a woman in the next village tied a live frog to her leg to cure a fever. It didn't work. Sanitation doesn't help, of course. The stream where you wash is also where people wash off things. Chamber pots get dumped behind homes. Pigs wander freely. Flies outnumber people. You once watched a man wipe his knife on his boot before carving into a roast chicken. No one blinks. Death from infection is common. Death from doctors is also common. Trepanation, cutting a hole in the skull to release demons, is still very much in fashion. Dentistry is a mallet and prayer. Childbirth is a coin flip. Even broken bones can be fatal if they get infected or heal badly. But you know all this. And still, when your grandmother rubs a foul-smelling salve onto your chest, something involving lard, mustard seeds, and crushed herbs, you believe. Because sometimes belief is what keeps you alive. That, and your mother's stubborn refusal to let you die from just a little throat soreness. You close your eyes. The fire crackles. The salve tingles. Maybe, just maybe, you'll survive this one. You stole a turnip once. It was small, shriveled, and half-rotten, but it was technically not yours, and that technically made it theft. You didn't get caught, thankfully, but you remember how fast your heart beat when you tucked it under your tunic and scurried away. Because in this world, punishment is not about rehabilitation. It's about example. Theft gets fingers chopped. Repeat theft? That's a hand. Maybe both. Depends on who you stole from and how badly they want revenge. Today, the village reeve is holding court in the square. A man stands trembling in front of him. The charge, taking 2 hens from the Lord's coop. Everyone already knows he's guilty. The chickens were found in his hut. One was half-eaten. The other had laid an egg, which his wife cooked into a sad-looking porridge. He'll be flogged, of course. If the Lord is feeling merciful, he'll be fined instead. But probably not. Mercy is in short supply, especially when people are hungry and the chickens belong to someone higher up the food chain. And then there's the stocks. You've seen people locked in them, wrists and neck through wooden holes, exposed to the weather and the cackling children of the village. They throw mud, eggs, words, sometimes stones. It's humiliating. That's the point. Humiliation is a tool here. It teaches everyone else what not to do. For more serious crimes, murder, heresy, treason, the punishments grow darker. Hanging, burning, beheading. All very public. All very permanent. The worst punishment isn't death, though. It's banishment. To be cast out of the village means certain doom. No food. No shelter. No safety from the wolves, both 4-legged and 2. Once, a girl who gave birth out of wedlock was expelled. She lasted 3 days before someone found her body near the river. They buried her in unconsecrated ground. No one spoke her name again. Justice here is local. It's not about law books or courtrooms. It's about power. About keeping the village running, the Lord fed, and the priest satisfied. You've heard of trials by ordeal, holding hot irons, walking over coals, dunking in water to see if you float. If you survive, you're innocent. If you don't, well, at least your soul is cleansed. Today's trial ends with the thief lashed 10 times, then locked in the stocks for half a day. His wife cries silently nearby. The villagers watch. Some nod approvingly. Others look away. You stare too long, and someone elbows you. You walk away, silently vowing never to steal again, even if it's just a turnip. Because justice in the Middle Ages doesn't need to be fair. It just needs to be visible. You return home, shaken. Your father barely looks up from his carving. Fool, he mutters, meaning the thief. Or maybe meaning you, for watching. Hard to tell. Outside, the chickens cluck softly in their coop. You pretend not to hear them. On Sundays, you don't sleep in. You wouldn't dare. The bells begin tolling before the sun peaks over the hills, echoing across the fields like a divine summons. Even if you're sore from a week of work or shivering from a midwinter fever, you rise. Everyone does. You file out of your home, cloak clasped and head bowed, joining a silent stream of neighbors all drifting toward the same place, the church. The church is not just a building. It's not even just a place of worship. It is the soul of your world, the place where your life is blessed, your sins are judged, your marriage is sealed, and, someday, your body buried. It looms over your village, made of stone, with arched windows and a door heavy enough to creak like a ship's hull. Inside, it smells of wax, wood smoke, damp stone, and something ancient, like the breath of time itself. Candles flicker faintly, not so much lighting the space as reminding you how dark it truly is without them. Their light dances over worn tapestries, fading saints, and a crucifix so massive and solemn you dare not meet the eyes of the man hanging from it. You sit on a cold wooden bench that creaks under you. Your feet are numb. You listen. The priest chants in Latin, which you do not understand, but that's not the point. He might as well be speaking the language of angels. That's his role, to be a bridge between your messy, aching, blaspheming life and something higher, holier, unchanging. You cross yourself. You murmur your prayers. You glance sideways at your neighbor who hasn't washed in a while. Not that you have. You swallow your hunger and think of heaven. But the church doesn't just own your Sundays. It owns your entire calendar. Feast days, fast days, saint days, Advent, Lent, Whitsuntide, Candlemas. Days where you must work less, eat less, confess more, pray harder. Days where bells toll again and again, not because someone has died, but because someone has lived so well they've become a symbol, an intercessor. You hear tales of martyrs who were flayed, saints who walked barefoot across mountains, holy women who never ate anything but communion bread. Their stories are wild, inspiring, a little terrifying. And the priest, we call him Father though most of us fear him more than love him, is the voice of that whole system. He's educated, sharp, fluent in scripture and scolding. He tells you how to live, what to avoid, and what happens if you fail. Spoiler, it usually involves hellfire. But there is comfort, too. The church offers a kind of order you can cling to when life feels like a stormy sea. There's the ritual, kneeling, rising, kneeling again. The rhythm, chant, silence, chant again. The smell of incense, the weight of holy water on your skin, the taste of stale bread on your tongue at communion. And beyond the ritual, there's the promise that your toil, your pain, your poverty, none of it is in vain. That if you endure with patience, confess your sins, love your neighbor, obey your Lord, and most importantly, pay your tithes, you'll earn a reward no earthly lord could ever give. Not gold, not bread, salvation. Of course, there's always politics. The bishop in the city is said to live in luxury, drinking imported wine and sitting on velvet cushions. Some say the Pope himself has a throne made of gold and a staff encrusted with rubies. The church is rich, and when it wants more, it raises taxes, calls them offerings, sends out enforcers in robes instead of armor. But most villagers don't complain, because they believe, or they fear, or they hope, or maybe all three. After all, when the crops fail, or the river floods, or your child coughs blood, who else will speak on your behalf to the heavens? You leave the church as you entered, cold, tired, but a little lighter in your soul. The air smells of earth and morning frost. You nod at your neighbors. You walk back to your home. There's bread to bake, manure to shovel, a cow to milk. God may rule the skies, but the earth still needs tending. Hunger isn't a feeling here. It's a fact. It follows you, day in, day out, like a low, persistent ache in your belly and bones. You dream of food more often than you dream of heaven. You wake up thinking about bread. You fall asleep wondering if tomorrow's loaf will be thinner than today's. This is not the world of abundance. This is the Middle Ages. And you, friend, are poor. Your meals revolve around one thing: bread. Coarse, dark, chewy bread. It's made from whatever grains you can grow or scavenge: barley, rye, sometimes oats. Wheat is a luxury reserved for the nobility and the church. Your flour is lumpy, speckled with bits of husk and grit. Your teeth will wear down early. Still, bread is life. You dip it in broth when there's broth to spare. You soak it in milk if the cow's been generous. On feast days, blessed, fleeting days, you might top it with a smear of cheese or an egg if one survives the hen's erratic schedule. Meat? Don't count on it. You might get scraps of bacon fat once a week, more often in winter when animals are slaughtered. Hunting is illegal for peasants. It's the Lord's right, and getting caught with a rabbit could earn you a flogging or worse. But sometimes, quietly, someone catches a bird, a hedgehog, even a squirrel. The trick is not getting caught. You boil most things. Stews are economical. Throw everything in. Hope the flavors mask the toughness. There's no refrigeration. Salt is precious. Herbs, parsley, sage, maybe some wild garlic, are the only things standing between food and mush. Vegetables come and go with the seasons. Cabbage, leeks, beans, root vegetables that last a little longer underground. You've learned to love onions. They bite you back, but they're honest. Fruits are a summer blessing. Berries, apples, plums. You eat them fresh. You dry what you can. You mash them into pastes or syrups to stretch them through winter. And drink? Ale. Always ale. It's safer than water, which is often shared with livestock and waste. Children drink weak ale from the moment they're weaned. The good news? It dulls the hunger. The bad news? It dulls almost everything. Wine exists, sure. For nobles. For monks. For priests who remind you that Jesus turned water into wine, but somehow never gets around to sharing. Holidays are different. On certain feast days, the village table grows long, and the food, by some miracle, abundant. Roasted goose, spiced pies, honeyed pastries, roasted apples with cloves. For a few brief hours, life tastes like celebration. But the next day, it's back to pottage. What's pottage, you ask? Take grains. Add vegetables. Maybe a bone, if you're lucky. Boil it until it surrenders. That's pottage. It's filling. It's warm. It's eternal, but not glamorous. You've heard that in the city, bakers add chalk to their flour to stretch it. That fishmongers soak old herring in brine and sell it as fresh. That some people eat frogs. You're not sure whether to believe it, or whether to be jealous. In famine years, when the rains don't come, or they come too much, it's worse. People eat bark, grass, cats, clay. Stories swirl of cannibalism in the highlands. You don't ask if they're true. You don't want to know. Still, food binds the community. You trade eggs for firewood. You bake extra loaves to give thanks. You share stews with widows. You sneak treats to children when their parents aren't looking. You chew slowly, not just because food is scarce, but because every bite feels sacred. One winter evening, your father takes a single apple, slices it into 6 thin slivers, and hands one to each child with solemn care. It tastes like sunlight, memory, and love. You'll remember it for the rest of your life. Let's start with a brutal truth. You smell. Everyone smells. But in the Middle Ages, this isn't the disaster it would be in modern life. It's just part of the atmosphere, like the church bell, the mud, or the never-ending bleating of goats. People expect it. People endure it. And strangely enough, people don't seem to mind, most of the time. You bathe, yes, just not every day, or even every week. If you live near a river or stream, that helps. In summer, you might strip down and wade into the water with your neighbors, scrubbing with sand or stale soap if you're lucky enough to have some. The water is muddy, but it's wet and it's cold, and it gives the illusion of cleanliness. That's good enough. There are public bathhouses in towns, big wooden tubs filled with steaming water, shared by strangers. You pay a coin. You soak. You gossip. You hope no one brings lice. Sometimes the experience veers closer to brothel than spa, especially in cities. The church frowns, of course. Nakedness, temptation, heated flesh, too many doors for the devil to stroll through. But the bathhouses persist, all the same. Because sometimes, even sin smells better than sweat. Now, if you're a peasant living in a thatched hut, bathing is much more intimate and much more rare. A wooden tub is a luxury. So is firewood to heat water. More often, families share a single bath, reusing the same murky water in descending order of importance. Father first, mother second, children next, then babies last. By the time the last kid is lowered in, the bathwater looks like weak stew. Still, it's something. Soap exists, but it's harsh, made from lye and animal fat. It strips dirt, sure, but also skin. You'll emerge cleaner, redder, and possibly in tears. Some people make gentler versions at home with herbs and ashes. But soap is not yet part of the daily rhythm. It's more like a distant cousin who only visits on feast days. What about teeth? You don't brush them. Toothpaste doesn't exist. Neither do dentists, unless you count the village blacksmith who's willing to yank a rotten molar with pliers after a swig of ale and a prayer. Instead, people chew mint, sage, or fennel seeds. They rinse their mouths with wine, vinegar, or urine. Yes, you read that right. Occasionally, they rub their teeth with cloth and ash. Your breath still smells like cabbage and despair. But hey, you're doing your best. Hair care? Simple. Keep it tied up or under a wimple. You might rinse with rainwater and comb out the tangles with a bone or wooden comb. Lice are a constant problem. Fleas, too. Everyone has them. Some people sleep with sprigs of lavender or wormwood under their sheets to drive the bugs away. Others just scratch and move on. Clothing is your first line of defense against the elements, and your last line of hygiene. You wear the same shift, a long linen underdress, for weeks. It absorbs sweat, filth, and fleas like a faithful sponge. You might wash it once a month if the weather allows. Woolen outer garments rarely get washed. Instead, you air them out, beat them with sticks, or sprinkle herbs inside to mask the smell. Deodorant? Nope. Perfume? Only for the rich, and even then, it's more about hiding than fixing. Men might carry pomanders, little metal balls filled with fragrant spices like cloves or nutmeg. Women tuck lavender sachets into their bodices. Monks burn incense to both worship God and overpower the stench of 40 unwashed brothers chanting in a stone hall. And what about bodily functions? Toilets, as you imagine them, don't exist. If you live in the countryside, you use a trench, a pit, or the edge of a field. Outhouses are common but rudimentary. Just a hole, a plank, maybe a bit of straw. If you're wealthy, you have a garderobe, a tiny room jutting out from a castle wall where your waist drops into the moat below. Romantic, isn't it? In towns, public latrines exist, but they overflow, stink, and attract rats. Chamber pots are more common. Clay or metal bowls used at night and dumped in the morning, sometimes into rivers, sometimes out windows. The warning cry of "Guard Loo," watch out for water, rings through the narrow streets. If you're not fast, you're soaked. Hand washing is not routine, at least not before or after using the toilet, but it is common before meals. People believe cleanliness of the hands honors God and guests. Water is poured over fingers from a jug, and you dry off with a shared cloth. It doesn't do much for bacteria, but it makes people feel respectable. Still, diseases come and go like uninvited guests. Dysentery, typhus, boils, skin infections. You don't understand germs, but you know when something stinks, literally or metaphorically. So, does medieval hygiene mean everyone walked around as human cesspools? Not quite. People did try. They valued cleanliness, especially in religious contexts. Monks bathed more often than layfolk, especially in Benedictine orders. Nuns kept linens fresh. Nobles sprinkled rosewater on their clothes. Children were taught to wash their faces and hands. And many homes, however poor, swept the floors, aired the bedding, and hung herbs to sweeten the air. In a world without antiseptic, bleach, or running water, hygiene wasn't perfect. But it wasn't ignored either, because even if you smelled, you still had dignity. And in this muddy, sweaty, toothless world, that counts for something. Imagine a Monday morning. Actually, imagine every morning, because there are no weekends here. No vacations, no paid leave, just the cycle of toil, sunrise to sunset, until the day you drop. Welcome to work in the medieval world. You're a peasant. That means you don't clock in at an office or answer emails. Your labor is physical, relentless, and entirely tied to the seasons. Spring brings plowing. Summer brings sowing. Autumn brings harvest. Winter brings freezing, chopping, mending, surviving. Let's talk about education. But before you imagine desks, chalkboards, or freshly sharpened pencils, let's adjust our expectations. In the medieval world, education looks a lot less like a school day and a lot more like a lifetime of listening, remembering, and, if you're lucky, scratching Latin onto calfskin parchment with a goose feather. First off, if you're a peasant, you probably never go to school. You learn from your parents, from watching, doing, repeating. You learn to plant by watching hands plunge into soil. You learn to bake by kneading dough alongside your mother. You learn how to barter, pray, complain, gossip, and obey, all by sheer osmosis. You may not be educated, but you're not ignorant either. You know the weather better than any scholar. You know when the wheat's ready, how to treat a sick lamb, which herbs help a sore tooth, and when the moon is just right to slaughter a pig. Your wisdom is earthy, practical, soaked into your skin and soul from the moment you could walk barefoot across cobblestones. But let's say, miraculously, you're born to a different life. Perhaps you're a noble's son or a merchant's child in a bustling city. Then your story changes. You might go to a monastic school often attached to an abbey. These are not charming places full of giggles and field trips. They are cold, silent, filled with the smell of ink and candle wax. You sit on a hard bench. You memorize Latin chants. You copy out prayers, psalms, and laws under the stern gaze of a robed monk who may or may not believe in mercy. Reading? That's holy work. Literally. Books are sacred objects, hand-copied, bound in leather, sometimes chained to desks to prevent theft. Most are in Latin, a few in Greek. Very, very few in the vernacular, the everyday tongue spoken in markets and kitchens. So even if you can read, it doesn't mean you can read anything useful. Writing? Even rarer. Quills break. Ink spills. Parchment is absurdly expensive, each sheet made from painstakingly stretched animal hide. A single mistake can ruin an hour's work. You learn to write slowly, perfectly, prayerfully. The process is equal parts calligraphy and penance. And math. Let's not even go there. If you're not in a guild that requires counting, like merchants or masons, math is treated with suspicion. Numbers feel too close to magic. Letters have godliness. Numbers have trickery. They smell of alchemy, of foreigners, of suspicious deals made in alleyways over coin. Still, education exists. It thrives in monasteries, cathedrals, and, by the 12th century, in the rising universities of Europe. Ah yes, the university. Imagine a group of scruffy young men in robes, arguing about Aristotle and Latin while trying not to freeze or starve. Lectures are delivered by men reading aloud from massive books. Students jot notes on wax tablets. Exams are oral, grueling, and given whenever your professor feels like it. There's no syllabus, no grades, just survival. You might study the trivium, grammar, rhetoric, logic. Then, if you have the stomach, the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, astronomy. A few go on to medicine, theology, or law. Women? Excluded almost entirely. A few noble girls are taught at home, learning manners, scripture, perhaps some basic reading. Nuns, however, are the real exception. Inside convent walls, women copy manuscripts, compose music, write poetry, and study scripture. Their minds are sharp, their pens steady, but their voices rarely leave the cloister. Back in the village, oral tradition rules. News, stories, songs, lessons, they're passed mouth to mouth like heirlooms. The traveling storyteller, the village priest, the gossiping baker's wife. These are your living books. Rhymes teach morals. Parables teach ethics. Old women teach you how to read the wind. Because even if you never touch a book, you still learn. You learn to remember, to speak, to listen. And in a world without easy paper or printing presses, memory is your bookshelf. But change is on the horizon. By the 13th and 14th centuries, more books are being copied. Vernacular languages are creeping in. People begin writing in French, German, English, Spanish, not just Latin. Literacy is still rare, but it's growing. Slowly, steadily, like a seed under the frost. By the late Middle Ages, there's a quiet revolution coming. Movable type, printing presses, mass literacy. But for now, knowledge is still a privilege. And words are still magic. Picture this, a muddy square, a wooden scaffold, a jeering crowd, a man in stocks, his face red with shame. Someone throws a cabbage. Another laughs. This isn't a play. It's court. Justice in medieval Europe is brutal, public, and strangely theatrical. You don't just punish wrongdoers. You perform their punishment, so everyone else gets the message loud and clear. Let's begin with the basics. There is no single legal code across medieval Europe. Every village, lordship, kingdom, and duchy might have its own rules. Some are based on Roman law. Others come from Germanic tribal customs. Many are a confusing blend of feudal tradition, church edicts, royal decrees, and good old-fashioned superstition. But one thing unites them all: justice is personal. You're not innocent until proven guilty. You're guilty until someone more powerful says you're not. If you're accused of theft, adultery, heresy, witchcraft, or simply annoying the wrong person, your fate depends on who you know, how much you can bribe, and whether God seems to like you today. Trials? Oh yes, there are trials. But not the calm, orderly kind you're thinking of. In some places, you might face trial by ordeal, a divine test to prove your innocence. Did you steal a loaf of bread? Very well. Plunge your hand into boiling water. If it heals cleanly in 3 days, you're innocent. If it festers, you're guilty. Accused of lying? Carry a red-hot iron bar a few steps. Survive without shrieking or blistering. God has spoken. Trial by combat is another favorite, especially among nobles. You and your accuser fight, swords or fists, in a formal duel. Whoever wins is right, because obviously, God would never let a liar win. Of course, the church has its own courts, especially for sins like blasphemy, adultery, and heresy. Church trials are wordy, secretive, and slow. They involve lots of Latin, lots of parchment, and lots of arguing over scripture. Punishments vary: fasting, pilgrimage, public confession. If you're lucky, that's all. If you're not, well, the firewood pile grows taller. But let's get back to secular justice, the kind that involves shouting, stocks, and public shame. For minor crimes, say public drunkenness or slander, you might be fined, or whipped, or locked in the stocks while children pelt you with eggs. These punishments are deliberately humiliating. They're not meant to hurt much, but to remind the entire village, behave, or you're next. For more serious crimes, like theft or murder, consequences are darker. A thief might lose a hand, a forger a finger. A murderer could be hanged, beheaded, or broken on the wheel. Execution is public because justice must be seen. Blood is a warning. Sometimes the punishment is symbolic. A gossip might have her head shaved. A shrewish wife might be forced to wear an iron bridle, called the scold's bridle, with a metal bit in her mouth. Humiliation is a tool. So is fear. But law is not just about punishment. It's about power. Lords have courts. Kings have courts. Bishops have courts. Justice is often about protecting wealth, land, and authority. The poor are punished swiftly. The rich are punished rarely. You know how this game works. And the people? They gather to watch. Justice is a community event. It's messy, emotional, theatrical. It reinforces the social order. It gives peasants something to talk about between harvests. And sometimes, just sometimes, it delivers real justice. A corrupt bailiff is ousted. A wronged widow wins her case. A cruel noble is humbled. The system creaks, but it moves. And in the end, people believe in justice. Because without it, the world would crumble faster than a leper's nose. Even if that justice involves boiling water and red-hot irons. You rise with the sun, not metaphorically, with it. Your eyes open when the rooster crows or the light filters through the cracks in your thatched roof. You stretch, groan, scratch, and begin. If you're a man, your job revolves around the land. You plow with a heavy wooden blade drawn by oxen. You break rocks. You haul water. You cut timber. You harvest hay. Your hands are calloused, your shoulders permanently sore, your back bent by the time you're 30. You carry the world on your spine, and nobody writes songs about it. If you're a woman, your work is no less brutal, just less visible. You wake the children, sweep the floor, stoke the hearth. You knead dough, milk goats, spin wool, pluck chickens, patch tunics, and try, somehow, to keep everyone fed and alive. You birth babies. You bury babies. You stitch and cry and sing lullabies even when your fingers are bleeding. No one calls you a heroine, but you are. Children work too. As soon as they can walk, they fetch kindling, feed animals, weed gardens, chase geese. Older boys learn their father's trade. Girls help their mothers. No one asks what they want to be when they grow up, because they already are grown up, at least in function. Now, not everyone is a peasant. Some folks have trades: blacksmiths, carpenters, millers, weavers, potters. These crafts require skill, patience, and often an apprenticeship lasting 7 years. If you live in a town, you might join a guild, a brotherhood of fellow craftsmen who regulate quality, prices, and training. Guilds are a source of pride, protection, and politics. Merchants work too. They travel, haggle, count coins, and haul goods in ox carts. Some grow rich. Most just get by. Nobles. They don't labor, per se. But managing land, resolving disputes, collecting taxes, and fending off rivals is its own kind of exhausting. And the church? Monks work in scriptoria, copying manuscripts with aching fingers. Nuns grow herbs and care for the sick. Priests preach, visit the dying, and manage village souls like shepherds guarding a very stubborn flock. But the true grind belongs to the peasant. Because even when you're done for the day, you're not really done. At home, there's bread to bake. tools to mend, wool to spin, a leaky roof to patch, a neighbor's ox to help pull from a ditch. If the baby's crying, or the cow's gone missing, or the stew's burned, guess what? That's still your job. The line between home and work does not exist. Your house is your workshop, kitchen, nursery, barn, and sick room. It smells like everything you've ever done. And leisure? Rare. There are holidays, religious festivals, saints' days, weddings. You drink, dance, laugh, and for one fleeting evening, forget the calluses on your hands. But the next morning, the fields are still waiting. Because the earth never stops asking. And neither can you. The bells toll softly at dusk, as they always have. One long peal for Compline, the evening prayer. Across Europe, from quiet hamlets to crumbling castles, the old rhythms still hum faintly beneath the surface. But if you listen closely, if you truly settle into the hush between notes, you'll hear something else. The world is changing, not all at once, not loudly, but inch by inch. A slow tide, receding, revealing something raw and unknown. This is the long fade of the medieval world. Let us take one last wandering walk through it, slowly, tenderly, as if visiting an old friend on their final day. This friend has been strange and brutal, yes, but also beautiful, brilliant, and breathtaking in its own dark poetry. We begin with the land. For centuries, it was everything. The earth was wealth, food, home, identity. You were born upon it, worked it, married beside it, buried beneath it. Its rhythm was your rhythm. Spring plow, summer sweat, autumn reaping, winter hunger. But now, things begin to shift. New plows arrive, heavier, iron-tipped. Fields are rotated more cleverly. Yields improve, if only slightly. Markets expand. Wool from English sheep travels to Flemish looms. French wine ends up in London cellars. Italian spices make it all the way to Lubeck. Cities, once modest, become restless. London, Bruges, Florence, Cologne. These are no longer sleepy towns with sheep nibbling near the gates. They're humming. Craft guilds rise. Wealth concentrates. Merchants begin to count their worth not in acres, but in coin. And with cities come ideas. Ideas that no longer bend automatically to the will of bishops or kings. Philosophers in Paris debate Aristotle. Poets in Tuscany turn their gaze inward. Dante, Petrarch, Boccaccio. A new language rises, the language of self, of spirit, of inner longing. The church, once the sun around which all life orbited, begins to wobble on its throne. Oh, it's still powerful. It still owns land, wealth, minds. But cracks appear. The Great Schism splits the papacy, 2 popes, then 3, each claiming divine authority while bickering like children. And people notice. They start to question. Not loudly, not yet. But questions grow like moss. Why must indulgences be sold? Why do monks live fat while peasants starve? Why is scripture locked in Latin when the soul speaks in the mother tongue? Some whisper heresy. Some light fires. Reformers are excommunicated. Some are burned. But the flame of doubt cannot be entirely smothered. It flickers, waits, learns to hide in books, in quiet prayer, in corners of dusty libraries. Meanwhile, the Black Death has come and gone, but not quietly. Between 1347 and 1351, it swept through villages like a scythe in a ripe field. Up to half of Europe, gone. Entire towns vanished. Priests died faster than they could be replaced. Fields went fallow. Walls crumbled. Markets emptied. The survivors are not the same. They walk with haunted eyes. They speak of omens, dreams, reckoning, but also of freedom. Because with half the workforce gone, the balance of power tilts. Laborers can now demand wages. Serfs begin to walk away from their lords. Peasant revolts erupt. Not all successful, but each a spark. The chains of feudalism rattle. Some begin to break. And women, yes, women shift too. Widows inherit property. Nuns write letters that shake kingdoms. Female mystics speak with the authority of prophets. They are still caged by custom and law, but the bars grow thinner in some places. In the chaos of plague and war, their voices carry farther than before. And war is always present. The 100 Years' War drags on like a groaning cough. England and France dance a bloody waltz over land and pride. Longbows replace knights. Castles are sieged, then outdated by gunpowder. The age of chivalry is pierced, literally and metaphorically, by arrows and bullets. Knighthood is no longer a noble calling. It is pageantry. It is nostalgia. The real power lies elsewhere now. With merchants. With banks in Florence and Venice. With the printing presses that will soon arrive in Mainz. With the quiet scribes translating Greek into Latin and Latin into English. The old order does not fall. It fades. It grows weary, stretched thin by contradictions it can no longer ignore. It gives way not to peace, but to possibility. And with that possibility comes rebirth. The Renaissance does not arrive on a specific date. It seeps through the cracks. It begins in art, in anatomy, in astronomy. It questions the world, dissects it, paints it in impossible detail. But let's not rush there just yet. Stay here with me a little longer. In the twilight, let's walk once more through a medieval village, this time with knowing eyes. The children chasing chickens. The old man mending a boot. The miller's wife humming over her dough. They are not fools. They are not relics. They are not shadows. They are human, as complex and yearning as we are. Their world is built of hardship and wonder, cruelty and community, superstition and song. It is full of contradictions because so are we. Their time was not dark. It was glowing dimly in places we have forgotten how to look. Yes, the streets smelled terrible. Yes, medical care involved leeches and prayers. Yes, justice could mean boiling your own hand in water. But it was also a time of cathedrals, built slowly, lovingly, stone by aching stone. Of songs passed from lips to lips across generations. Of mothers warming their babies by the hearth. Of monks illuminating tiny gold letters while winter howled outside. So now, as we step away from that world, let us not laugh at it. Let us not dismiss it as savage or stupid. Let us honor it, in all its strangeness and stubborn endurance. Because in the end, you wouldn't last a day in medieval times. Not just because of the filth or the violence or the labor, but because you're used to light at the flick of a switch, clean water from a tap, and privacy the size of a phone screen. The medieval world was slower, yes, but also deeper. Every choice cost more. Every pleasure was sharper. Every moment, hard-won. So tonight, as you drift off to sleep, know this. You walk on ground they once farmed. You speak words they once whispered. You live in buildings, read books, and wear clothes all shaped by the echo of their hands. They are gone, but not forgotten. And in the long hush of history, if you close your eyes and listen, you can still hear them. The toll of bells, the chant of monks, the crackle of fire, the soft sound of a quill scratching across skin. Good night, traveler. Sleep deeply. Dream medieval.